Hey, what's up? It's your boy 2. I'm here to tell you that I have a possibly debilitating addiction to pink-haired anime girls, and that means the sassy divination girl from China in space is no exception. I don't know if you needed to know that, but you do now. In any case, here's a guide on how to play Xuan. Xuan is a 5-star preservation character who debuted as the second limited character of 1.3. Preservation characters in Star Rail use shields as one of the defining traits as a path, but Xuan is unique in that rather than shields, she simply mitigates the damage her teammates take by taking some of the damage they would have taken herself. The TLDR is this: Xuan is a great defensive support who offers both good defensive utility with her damage mitigation mechanic and offensive support through her skill's party crit rate buff and AoE ultimate that can help break enemies weak to quantum. If you're struggling to break past one of the higher MOC levels or having some trouble clearing Swarm 4 or 5, the angy pink-haired Chinese anime girl who looks like she's gonna smash a crystal ball into your fucking face might be just who you need to do it. So first, let's go over her stats. At level 80, she's got 1474 HP, 465 attack, 606 defense, and 100 speed. Right off the bat, she has the highest base HP value I've ever seen so far in the game. There might be someone else who has higher base HP, like maybe Gepard, I don't know, but for now I'll go with the assumption that Xuan has the highest, which you wouldn't really expect just from looking at her. She also has very high defense, and it's also the highest base defense value I've ever seen so far. Both of these stats make sense given that she's a preservation character, so you love to see it. But she also has painfully average speed, and I'd recommend speed boots to help correct that for reasons I'll explain later. Next, let's go over her kit, starting with her skill called Known by Stars, Shown by Hearts. When she uses it, it gives the team the Matrix of Prescience state for 3 turns, in which Xuan's teammates offload 65% of the damage that they take from an enemy attack onto her. However, Xuan herself does not get this damage mitigation buff, though it's not like it matters since she'll end up taking full damage anyway. The damage distribution is calculated before any shields that her teammates may have are taken into account, so Xuan will still take damage even if everyone is shielded, but if Xuan herself has any shields, her shields will take the distributed damage first before her own HP is affected. In addition, while Matrix is still active, it also gives the team the knowledge buff, which both increases everyone's max HP by 3 to 7.5% of Xuan's own max HP, and crit rate by 6 to 15%, scaling from levels 1 to 15. But if Xuan dies at any time in battle, her skill will deactivate immediately. Her ultimate, Woes of Many Morphed into One, is an AoE that hits all enemies, in case you weren't convinced that she's basically angy all the time just from looking at her default facial expression. You definitely are now. The only other thing that her ult does is give Xuan 1 activation stack for her talent, which is called Bleak Breeds Bliss, which applies the Misfortune Avoidance state onto the team so long as Xuan is still standing. This state decreases the individual damage taken by your characters by 10 to 22%, which then reduces the amount of damage Xuan has to eat because of her skill's damage mitigation mechanic. While I don't have any evidence to back this up, I do think that this damage reduction does not apply to the damage that gets transferred to Xuan from her teammates because of the skill, because that's basically double dipping at that point, but it should still apply when she herself is attacked directly. And whenever her HP drops to half her max HP or less, she instantly heals herself for 80 to 95% of her currently missing HP, and the animation for this effect is one of the coolest animations in the whole game. However, this Omega heal, if you will not work if Xuan just gets straight up one-shot by an attack, which certainly can happen, particularly from like really strong AoE attacks from bosses, since remember, not only is Xuan herself taking damage in these cases, but she's also eating the damage that all her teammates are also transferring to her. Her Omega heal works off stacks, as indicated by the 2 dots down on her avatar in-game. She starts with 1 by default going into a fight, and she can have up to 2 at any given time. The only way for her to gain more stacks of these Omega heals is by using her ultimate. Lastly, her technique of Fortune Comes Fate gives her or whoever else you switch to a 20-second barrier that blocks all incoming enemy attacks and prevents you from entering battle as a result. If you attack an enemy with this barrier up, though, you'll go into the fight with Xuan's skill automatically activated, but it'll only last for 2 turns instead of the usual 3. Keep in mind that you can use this technique to speedrun stuff like main quests and some events, just like how you could use Selly's technique to run past enemies to find the graffiti and other random stuff in Silverwolf's event back in 1.1. I guess it makes sense that the two Angie Quantum characters both have techniques that basically tell enemies to go fuck off. Alright, time for her traces. She gets a whopping 18.7% crit rate, 18% max HP, and 10% effect res as bonus stats, and her bonus abilities are Taiyi, the Macrocosmic, which gives her 20 extra energy if she uses her skill again while her skill is already active, basically. Dunjia, the Meta Mystic, which heals her teammates but not herself by 5% of her max HP plus 133, and Liu Ren, the Sexagenary, which gives her Matrix effect a one-time CC debuff immunity that blocks all incoming CC debuffs by an enemy during their turn. Even if an enemy uses a CC against one ally only, it'll still use up the entire team's CC block stack, but Xuan can regain it just by using her skill again. Unlock Liu Ren and Taiyi first, since Liu Ren gives her skill another layer of utility and Taiyi doesn't need a track of destiny, followed by Dunjia last, since the healing on it is pretty minor. Also, people definitely aren't gonna take her third bonus ability's name out of context. Who would do that? Okay, time to go over her game plan. Normally, Xuan would be like Tingyun, where she only needs to press E once every 3 turns, but her first bonus ability, giving her 20 extra energy, gives you a reason to use it earlier, especially considering her ult is 135 energy, and if you're fighting some strong enemies and Xuan's under a lot of pressure, you'll certainly want to get her ult more frequently for more Omega heal stacks. So, against enemies who don't do that much damage, or your healer is really good and can comfortably keep Xuan topped off, you can go easy on Xuan's skill, which makes her SP positive, but against stronger enemies, this may change. Keep an eye on Xuan's energy gauge and use her skill more or less frequently, depending on your circumstances. Another thing to note about her skill is that the damage mitigation also takes DOTs into account. So if your teammates have any active enemy DOTs on them, the damage they would take from them also gets transferred, or at least part of it, to Xuan. This is really nice and basically makes it so that you don't ever have to worry about your team getting fucked by DOT damage anymore, for the most part. Don't forget about her party-wide crit rate buff either. It's one of the best features of her skill. Just because of that alone, Xuan is a fantastic buffer, cause, as we all know, crit rate can be a bitch to get sometimes. Throw in Two-Piece Fleet or Broken Keel, and Xuan also buffs attack or crit damage for another layer of support, along with her second bonus ability that lets her heal her team every time she ults, and her ult itself that can help break enemies. My point is that Xuan isn't just a defensive support whose sole purpose is to be a damage dumpster for her teammates and that's it. It's her main job, sure, but it's far from the only one. She brings more utility to the table with the side perks that she's got or can have, and while each of her side perks individually, with the exception of her crit rate buff of course, might not be that strong, together they add up to greatly enhance Xuan's value to the team. Because in Star Rail, since you can only have 4 characters in a team, each character slot is extremely valuable, and it's in your best interest to ensure that each character is pulling their own weight and value. So the more versatile a character is, the more value you get out of them. And with what Xuan can do, she can potentially do the job of 2 characters at once, which frees up a slot for you to bring someone else, preferably another buffer or DPS, to improve your team's damage output, which in turn may be exactly what you need to finally beat MOC 9 or 10 or Swarm 5 or whatever else it is that you're stuck on. But as I mentioned before when talking about her talent, Xuan's main problem is bosses or fights where enemies do a shit ton of damage, like when the Swarm bugs decide that it's a good idea to kamikaze your ass because fuck you. If it only happens like once or twice and you can slow the enemies down so that they don't smack your team for 1,000,000 damage as often, then Xuan can patch herself up with her Omega heals and have the time to get her Omega heal stacks back. But if she can't get her stacks back for whatever reason, or if enemies just, buff themselves so hard that the amount of damage that she eats as a result of them slamming your team is just way too much for her to handle, then that's a literal skill issue now, isn't it? Oh, and for the record, Blade does not synergize with Xuan like people thought he would. Anytime he consumes his own HP, Xuan does not mitigate any of the damage that he takes as a result. probably because the game makes a difference between health consumption and health reduction, if that makes any sense. So to summarize, use the pink girl's skill every 3 turns, use it faster if you need more energy for more ults, use her ult to help break enemies if they're weak to quantum, and to build up her Omega heal stacks. Keep an eye on Xuan's HP and her Omega heal stacks when you're up against really strong enemies, and watch her slap people because she's sick and frickin' tired of having a migraine all the damn time. Time for her light cones. As always, grab a copy of her gacha light cone if you can. It gives her extra max HP and energy regen, both of which are very nice, and it gives her damage mitigation mechanic more layers of utility by increasing her allies' damage dealt whenever Xuan's own HP is reduced in any way, and healing her team for 80% of their currently missing HP when they go into a new wave of enemies. Unfortunately, she doesn't have a lot of other light cones to work with. She has the same problem as Blade, where both of them scale off a stat that's different from what the rest of the characters in their paths do. In Xuan's case, most light cones scale off defense when she wants HP. So her best light cone that isn't her limited gacha one is the free 5-star from her to store, Texture of Memories, which is actually pretty notable because it gives her a shield, something that no other preservation light cone does, and it gives extra effect res and damage reduction on top of that. Her best 4-star light cone is Landau's Choice, since it gives her more damage reduction too. Just be more vigilant on keeping her healthy because it'll also increase her aggro. And for 3 stars, pick between defense or pioneering. For Relics, I think the only full 4-piece set that she can viably use is 4-piece Quantum, and obviously that's for a DPS Xuan build, which isn't how most players will build her anyway, unless you get a kick out of watching her clap some cheeks. The conventional builds for her are likely gonna be double 2-piece sets, and the most common one will be 2-piece HP and Speed, with 2-piece Thief and Guard being secondary options if anyone even bothers keeping guard pieces these days. For Ornaments, pick among Fleet, Broken Keel, or Sprightly for support Xuan. If you want Xuan to smash even harder, Inert Salsodo is probably your best one since it buffs her ult damage. For main stats, go with Speed Boots, HP or crit damage body since Xuan gives herself a ton of crit rate stats already, 30% between her traces and skill alone. HP Rope and either HP or Quantum Planar, again depending on if you want Calm or Mage Xuan. Try to have Xuan to be either the fastest or second fastest character on your team, so that way your DPS can start off with their crit rate buff right away. And for substats, go for HP percent, effect res, and speed for support, and double crit, HP percent, speed, and break effect for DPS. And finally, her Eidolons. Both her E1 and E2 are extremely valuable. Her E1 makes her skill also give a 30% crit damage buff on top of the crit rate buff it already has, so she becomes an even crazier support. And her E2 gives her access to a resurrection that doesn't just revive only one ally, it resurrects everyone who dies at the same time from one instance of enemy damage while her skill is active. The kicker is that it should even work on Xuan herself, so it's Gepard's self-res, but technically even better. Her E4 and E6 are more for a DPS build. E4 lets her regen energy anytime her team gets attacked while her skill is active, which should be all the time, so she can spam her ult a lot more. And her E6 increases her ult damage based on how much total damage her team's taken in between individual ults, that is. So if you want to see the angy pink-haired anime girl squish people as hard as the game will allow, you can for the low price of $1,000 frickin' dollars. It'll probably cost you more than that, to be honest. In summary, Pinky is a multi-role support who focuses mainly on defense in the form of damage mitigation, but also buffs crit rate and other stats depending on what ornament set you give her, and she basically single-handedly nullifies enemy DOTs as a threat to your team, so long as you can keep her topped up, of course. The sheer amount of value she gives to the team she's in can oftentimes let her do the job of 2 characters at once, and it's no wonder that she's the reason why some people are starting to be able to break into higher MOC levels or higher swarm difficulties. And remember, if you're missing your USB-C charger, Xuan's got you covered. Make sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel. I've got a series of guides on a lot of other Star Rail characters and more to come in the future. Check out the stream, twitch.tv/ToastSniper98 for Star Rail and other gacha streams. Thanks for watching. Peace.
Let's go. You're a shark, motherfucker, and nobody likes you. Xuan!